Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. In today's episode, we're going to break down how the Philadelphia Phillies showed out at last night's MLB AllStar game down in Texas and why it was basically a perfect night if you're a Philadelphia Phillies fan.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I am your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for checking us out. We come to you live from the Locked On Podcast Network. You may know me for some of my other work. Been hosting radio in this city for over 5 years now at 97.5 The Fanatic, 3 years as a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member. And this is my third year as the host of Locked On Phillies. So thank you so much for joining us. If you want to take it a step further, please, I would love for you to rate and review wherever you consume this. If you're listening in podcast form, if you're watching on YouTube and haven't subscribed yet, or maybe you want to flip over from podcast to YouTube, subscribing to the YouTube gets you notifications when new episodes are posted. And it really, really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. It's quick, it's easy, it costs you nothing, and it makes a big difference to me. So I'd appreciate anyone who did that, or of course anyone who's done that already. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code, it's all in lowercase, LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. See, what other shows you listen to get you $100 to put out on Prize Picks? Man, that's why you check out Locked On Phillies. And we're recapping last night's MLB All-Star game down at Globe Life Park. Globe Life Park or Globe Life Field? Bottom line, down in Texas, in Arlington. I hate when they build new stadiums. I got to learn all these new names. I remember the ballpark in Arlington. Does that make me old? Man, there's not many stadiums around baseball that make me feel old yet, but I'm getting there. Bottom line is, last night, it was a great stage for one of the greatest events in the sport. The MLB All-Star Game was awesome. It wasn't the most high-scoring type of affair, a 5-3 final that saw the American League win for the 10th time in 11 years. More on that in a little bit. But the Philadelphia Phillies, if you're a fan of them, and if you're watching Locked On Phillies, I assume you probably are, they had themselves a near-perfect night. It was a great performance by all the Philadelphia Phillies who participated in the All-Star game. Now, Ranger Suarez and Zach Wheeler, they were not there. They did not make the trip to Texas. They're both taking the time off, dealing with some stuff. We'll talk about Ranger in the final segment because there is a little bit to be concerned with injury-wise with Ranger and part of the reason why he wasn't down there. But the 6 Phillies that participated, 3 position players, 3 pitchers, Alec Bohm, Trea Turner, and Bryce Harper all started at their respective positions for the National League. And they were as good as you could have hoped, right? They all had a hit in the game. Bryce Harper, the first hit of the game, a double, because who's going to start off the All-Star game? But Bryce Harper with an opposite field double to move up Shohei Ohtani from first to third. It's just beautiful to see him in the national spotlight. He had some great things to say about the Philadelphia Phillies ahead of the game, about how they've built a winning culture, and Dave Dombrowski is a guy that he fully trusts. He knows what Dave wants to do. He wants to win. Bryce Harper had himself a great weekend, and I'm not just talking about the awesome look of him and that nice clean white shirt and the cowboy hat, pandering to the folks down in Texas the same way he does sometimes us up here in Philadelphia. But no, Bryce Harper was great. Trea Turner had a hit. Alec Bohm had a hit. And there was a moment early on in the game before we get to the pitchers. Cristopher Sanchez, Jeff Hoffman, and Matt Strahm all saw action in this game. Well, there was a moment where all the guys were mic'd up that were in the field. Trea Turner, Alec Bohm, and Bryce Harper all got on the mic at the same time to talk to the live TV broadcast. And it was funny. They were all laughing and chuckling. There was a shot thrown out of Bryson Stott right off the bat saying it would be more fun if one of our infielders wasn't on the beach right now. Now, Bryson Stott hasn't had a good enough year to be an all-star, so it is what it is. I think Bryce Harper was the one who made that joke. They were roommates back in Vegas. Like, those guys have known each other for a long, long time. Bryce Harper is the ultimate mentor to Bryson Stott, so no bad blood there. It's funny to see these guys interact. They actually like each other. You love to see that. The locker room this team is built. It's something Bryce Harper talked about when I was talking about those clips earlier, if I'm talking about Dave Dombrowski and the team culture. Like, it's just such a close locker room. And you could see that they're all making fun of each other. They're all not taking anything too seriously. Now it's the All-Star game. No one really takes it too seriously. But there was a play. It may have been, the TV broadcast called it, the best play they've seen someone make with a live mic on. I don't know if that's in the All-Star game. I don't know if that's ever, but there was a ball hit back up the middle that Trea Turner dove to his left for, flipped to second, and you got yourself a situation where Ketel Marte was the only non-Philadelphia Phillies member of the infield playing second base there. He ranges over, covers second. It was a great play. And then, of course, there's got to be something said because Trea Turner gets up and complains about his belt. He was wearing a fancy, shiny belt. And one of the first things he says after making the great play, and Bryce Harper and Alec Bohm were fired up, by the way, watching him make that play, he complains about his belt because normally he wears a little league belt because the big fancy ones aren't comfortable for him. And that's just, I love it, dude. The guy signs a $300 million contract. He's still wearing little league belts. I'm not saying he's like, oh, salt of the earth, man of the people. He drives an old beat up Chevy to the ball. Like, no, it's not that. And I'm sure Trea Turner has some expensive things, but it's funny that these guys feel comfortable to let their personality come out with the Philadelphia Phillies and on a national stage. So that was great to see from the position players. It was a great moment to see those guys on the national stage. Last year, we saw it with the Atlanta Braves when Rob Thomson, who was managing the All-Star game last year, more on that in a second, decided to they weren't all starters, but get all the Braves infield on the field at the same time, and they had them all mic'd up. And I was thinking, how cool would it be? How awesome would it be to see like a whole group of your guys in the All-Star game mic'd up? The Phillies had the talent the past couple of years. They just hadn't had the execution early on in the season to earn multiple trips to the All-Star game like that, like multiple. This year they had 8, 6 went, and that was a awesome moment for Phillies fans. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Something else you definitely should have enjoyed was the pitching performance of Cristopher Sanchez, Jeff Hoffman, and Matt Strahm. Now, Sanchez was the most efficient. He only threw 2 pitches, got 2 outs, was promptly removed by Torey Lovullo, the manager of the Diamondbacks, who was serving as the manager of the National League All-Star team. They won the pennant last year, in case you blocked that from your memory, which I would be totally understanding of as a Phillies fan. But Cristopher Sanchez gave one of the more efficient performances in All-Star history. 2 pitches, 2 outs is great. Keeps the pitch count down, and it makes him look really, really good. Jeff Hoffman, Matt Strahm each gotten out. In total, the Philadelphia Phillies pitchers did not allow a base runner, a hit, a walk, anything. Just a solid performance on the mound, something you've come to expect from this pitching staff. And pitching was a big part of the All-Star game. You got to see Paul Skeens, who maybe you'll see this weekend when the Philadelphia Phillies resume their second half of the schedule by heading out to Pittsburgh across the state. We're going to preview that series on Friday. Maybe by Friday we'll know if Skeens is throwing in that one, but he looked electric. The Phillies pitchers looked electric. I mean, everybody looked really, really darn good. So it was a fun All-Star game. Now, again, the American League won 5-3. Jared Duran of the Red Sox wins wins All-Star game MVP. He had a go-ahead home run in the 5th inning of that game, and there was no scoring after the 5th inning. The bullpens locked it down. You also got to see Mason Miller, who maybe we'll talk about tomorrow when we run through some potential trade options for the Philadelphia Phillies. I may have something bold to say, and it's prisoner of the moment, and it has to deal with Mason Miller and what I'd be willing to trade for him after seeing him in the All-Star game last night. My goodness, that dude is good. But something to keep in mind, just for the rest of baseball, and if you're a Philadelphia Phillies fan, I brought it up. The American League has won 10 of the last 11 times the All-Star game has been held. The only time in the past 11 opportunities that the National League has won was last year with, oh yeah, that's right, Rob Thomson managing the National League side. I don't know what other National League managers can't figure out, but if that's not proof that Rob Thomson doesn't know what he's doing, I know it's a small sample size, but come on. If you can manage the National League All-Star team to a win against the American League, basically in this millennium, that's a pretty darn good feat compared to what peers have been able to do. I don't know why the American League always wins. I don't get it. Previously, it might have been like a conversation about DH and how they have that extra hitter and they're used to using it and everything. I don't buy that at all. I look at this and I say, well, this is just kind of weird circumstance at this point. So that's why I think that Rob Thomson should manage the All-Star game every single year until he decides to hang it up. Listen, he can win. If the National League wants to win, that's what they'll do. Now, it's not like previous years, like growing up, where if you won the All-Star game, you'd get home field advantage in the World Series. No, that's not it at all. It doesn't matter for that anymore. The highest standing between the two teams playing in the World Series is how you determine home field advantage now. So that has changed. It's not that big of a deal. Another thing that has changed that needs to change back to, this is some commentary that I saw. I want to give my quick thoughts on it. The uniforms are like, I didn't think they were as ugly as everyone thought they were. They weren't like abysmal, hideous uniforms, but they weren't pretty. And this is an event that Major League Baseball does a great job with every single year outside of the jerseys. I don't know why they switched from players wearing their team jerseys. I don't get it. It's not more aesthetically pleasing. You never had an issue with that. Apparently, they did not consult with the Players Association when making that change, so the players were not asked about it. Major League Baseball just said, hey, we're going to flip it over. I'll make my case right now, too. Well, not even make my case. I'm just going to say, bring back the players wearing their own team's jerseys. It's ridiculous you don't still do that. I don't think that's just nostalgia. Sometimes you think things were better back in the day, and they actually weren't. It's just you remember it differently. You remember it fonder when time passes. No, that's just objectively the better way to do it. So hopefully Major League Baseball will make that change next year after the Philadelphia Phillies win the National League pennant, and Rob Thomson is managing the National League to their second win in the last 12 All-Star games. But for everything else besides the uniform, it was a darn good day, or I guess night, at the ballpark for Philadelphia Phillies fans. And the most important thing, everybody got out healthy. It was efficient. They got some play, but not too much play. It was just a great night for the Phillies. Bryce Harper, Alec Bohm, Trea Turner, Cristopher Sanchez, Jeff Hoffman, Matt Strahm to be in the national spotlight. Absolutely love it. Now, coming up next, we're going to turn our eyes, because now the All-Star game's over. The Phillies have the next two nights off. We're going to turn our eyes to the second half. I'm going to give you the most important players to me of the second half for the Philadelphia Phillies. I'm going to give you two position players. I'm going to give you one starting pitcher, and I'm going to give you a bullpen pitcher that really need to step up if the Phillies are going to go where they want to go for the rest of the regular season. And, obviously, for the postseason. We'll get into that coming up as we continue Locked On Phillies. First, let's talk about our friends over at SupplyHouse.com, because you can get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades. That's SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. You can shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands, and you can get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Maybe you need help with an order. Well, you get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business, and you get to talk to a real person every time with Supply House. Pros in the skilled trades, you can get a competitive advantage by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master is going to get a dedicated phone line. You get access to that, and you also get free shipping, discounts on every order, so you can join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM. And you can order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be checking them out. Go ahead and use our friends at supplyhouse.com. I also want to tell you about Prize Picks. They're America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. They got over 5 million active members, and they're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, Prize Picks, you just have to play against the numbers. You're not beating like a stack of players who maybe you were one away from being perfect, but like some other guy random out in, I don't know, Utah or something, decided that he was going to be perfect that day and you don't win anything. No, all you do is you pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and you watch the winnings roll in. Now's the perfect time to get in because we got 2 nights off before baseball gets back. There's plenty of stuff still on Prize Picks that you can check in on, but it's a slow sports time of the year, so this is the time to sign up, get familiar with the app. Look how easy it is to use. I mean, you could put together a lineup in like 45 to 60 seconds. Doesn't take a lot of time, and it could definitely pay dividends. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You could turn $10 into $1,000 in a snap. If you're looking for promotions, well, the Phillies play again on Friday. Prize Picks has you covered on Fridays. You know what they do? You get your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. Also on Tuesdays, they lower some select player stat projections to help your lineup hit. They got everything you need. And also, this may be the best part. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB. You'll get a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. All you do is you just pick more or you pick less. And with Prize Picks, it's that easy. So let's talk about the most important players of the second half for the Philadelphia Phillies. I'm going to pick, again, 2 position players, 1 starting pitcher, and 1 relief pitcher, and make my case for why these guys are super important for the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, the first position player that I'm going to pick that is one of the most important players for the Philadelphia Phillies in the second half of the season is JT Realmuto. What the Phillies have been this year is they have been darn consistent. Guys have gone through slight slumps. Guys that have slumped to start the season have tried to come out of it. Some have, some haven't. That's part of the reason Whit Merrifield's no longer on this team, but Nick Castellanos has started to pick it up. Bryson Stott has started to show signs of life, being the hitter he used to be. But the one thing I've looked at over the past month and a half that the Philadelphia Phillies need is they need a catcher. And guess what, folks? JT Realmuto, he's that guy, and he's coming back soon. He should be back sometime in the next week and a half. And that's why he's important, right? Because how does this team elevate their ceiling? I don't think, and we're going to talk about the trade deadline in tomorrow's episode. I don't think, let me get this Prize Picks thing out of here. I just saw that if you're watching on YouTube. I don't think you're going to get someone at the trade deadline that is like a major improvement over the guy you currently have at the position. Are there better players than Johan Rojas and Brandon Marsh and Christian Pache out there that you can add to this outfield to put you in a spot where you look better top to bottom in the lineup? Absolutely. But is it going to be as big of an improvement as JT Realmuto is over Rafael Marchand and Garrett Stubbs? No way, man. JT Realmuto is like an all-world catcher, and you have him coming back. And why he's so important? Well, he's going to be one of the guys that really determines what the ceiling of this team is in the second half. They've been good even without him. So imagine how good they can be with him. You saw what this team looked like without Trea Turner. They won, and then you bring him back, and he's hitting like 345. So it can make a huge difference getting back an all-world talent. And JT Realmuto, if he comes back and is the player you expect him to be, well, that just makes this lineup even more dangerous. That's why he's hugely important, because he's going to help this team reach their ceiling, and he won't cost you anything, unlike players at the trade deadline. The other position player that I think is really important is Brandon Marsh. And you might say, well, he's been a platoon guy. He hasn't hit against lefties since like early May. Why is he so important if you're going to add to the outfield? Well, because I think you're looking at a center fielder that you can add. And if you do that, well, you still need someone to play in the corners. And it's not going to be Johan Rojas playing left field. No, he's a guy that you're going to use as a defensive replacement or a base running replacement, and he'll be playing center field behind whoever you acquire. You may have to get another guy. You may have to get 2 outfielders if you don't believe in the left field spot. But Brandon Marsh is a guy who can maybe make the Phillies believe in what they have out in left field. If he can put something together over the next couple weeks ahead of the trade deadline and start to look like a bona fide, maybe even just a platoon player. So you can go out and you can get a guy that, I don't know, is just a right-handed bat to hit lefties that you play out there in left field as well every day that you face a left-handed pitcher, rather than putting Brandon Marsh lefty on lefty, which they don't like to do. That would be hugely beneficial to Dave Dombrowski, saving some assets at the deadline. If you got to go get 2 starters, that's a tall task. If you have to get 1 starter and a backup in the outfield or a platoon player in the outfield, that's a lot more doable. And the only way that you can have the luxury to do that is if Brandon Marsh steps up and continues to play the way he showed flashes of at points in the first half of the season. A consistent good 2 weeks here from Brandon Marsh. Next thing you know, you could be looking at a whole different outlook in the outfield. Nick Castellanos is obviously set out there in right field, but Brandon Marsh is super important. Now, starting pitching. The starter that is most important to the Philadelphia Phillies the rest of the way, to me, is Ranger Suarez, because we know how good this rotation can be when he's great, and we know how shaky your rotation can get if you got a guy in the middle of it that isn't pitching his best. And Ranger Suarez lately has not been pitching his best. We're going to talk about him coming up in the final segment, so I want to save a little bit of what I want to say about Ranger Suarez right now for that. But all I'll say is Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola are going to be consistently good. Cristopher Sanchez has shown you he's been pretty darn dominant this year as well. But all of those guys, all-star caliber. Two of those guys actually made the all-star team. Aaron Nola did not make it, but it's just been a stacked season for the Phillies, so you kind of understand. He was just the odd man out of those top four guys. But I see Ranger Suarez, kind of like how we talked about JT Realmuto, finding the ceiling of this team, or I guess of the lineup. Ranger Suarez is going to be the determination of whether or not this Phillies rotation can hit their ceiling again in the second half. I believe they hit their ceiling in the first half for a wide stretch of the schedule. To get back to that, Ranger's going to have to be really good. And then let's go with a reliever real quick before we move on to our final segment. The reliever I see is most important for the Philadelphia Phillies the rest of the way is Jose Alvarado. You look at it and you say, okay, you have two lockdown, crazy good relievers that were both all-stars, in Jeff Hoffman and Matt Strahm. You know what you're getting out of those guys. Righty high leverage, lefty high leverage, perfect. I also look at Orion Kirkring and I say he's had a sneaky good year. It's hard to remember, but this dude was in low A ball last year, and he just came up at the end of the year, and he's just kind of getting his first regular season experience this year. He pitched in like 2 games in the regular season last year, right before going into the postseason. He's been really good. I trust him in high leverage spots in the postseason. So that's 3 guys. And Jose Alvarado is a guy you should trust in those high leverage spots. But he hasn't been the guy he was last year. Last year, Alvarado was absolutely dominant, one of the best lefty relievers in the sport. This year, he's been good, not great. If he can get back to his greatness, that gives you 4 guys that you trust right now, and you're probably going to go add another one of those guys at the trade deadline to add to the bullpen, a 5th guy that you trust in those high leverage spots. If you have this rotation and 5 great pitchers out of the bullpen and a couple other guys you can use to potentially get a good inning here or there, it's Anthony Dominguez and Gregory Soto, well, that looks like a darn good playoff baseball team. And I think Jose Alvarado is the key to making us a lot more comfortable with where they stand on that front. So those are my most important players. You can let me know if you think somebody else is more important than those guys in the comments. So let me know on the YouTube there. I'm happy to have the discussion. There are plenty of guys who are important to this team. Whatever the case may be, I think the Phillies are going to be in good shape. But we do have a little bit of a concern about Ranger Suarez. That is some new information to me that I want to pass along to you. I'm not losing my mind over it, but I'll tell you why I'm a little more worried than I have been in the past with Ranger Suarez's status right now, coming up as we wrap up today's episode. First, though, let's talk about eBay Motors, because if you're worried about the status of your car, well, you should check out eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is the formula for winning championships. And it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. They got superchargers, they got roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and much, much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. They got over 122 million parts for your vehicle, and you're always going to find exactly what you're looking for because of that amount of inventory. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part's guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. They got all the parts you need at the prices you want, so it's super easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Now, this Ranger Suarez situation has gotten interesting. The Philadelphia Phillies apparently, they told him not to go to the All-Star game. Zach Wheeler, they gave him the option, it sounds like, and he chose not to because he's not feeling his best. He wasn't going to throw. Ranger Suarez, though, they said, yo, don't go to the All-Star game. And I've started to hear some whispers. I know I've said multiple times on the podcast, it's not like there's an injury or anything. He's just trying to find his changeup. He's just trying to find his curveball. It sounds like he's got a little bit of a back issue going on. Now, that's also what Zach Wheeler has going on. Some back tightness for Wheeler that caused him to miss his final start of the first half, which would have been Sunday against the Athletics. If you remember, that Sunday game did not exactly go the Philadelphia Phillies' way. Bullpen games are killers for a season, not because you're going to lose all of them. You can win a bullpen game, especially with this bullpen, but it really taxes arms that you're going to need in the postseason. And the more you can balance the amount of time you use starters and the amount of time you use the bullpen, the better chance that you get these guys to the postseason without being burned out. What the rest of the season is a war of attrition. And a whole baseball season kind of is like that naturally due to the length. When you play 162 games, health is going to be hard to come by. It's by far the longest season in the major North American sports. It's going to be tough to keep these guys rested, focused, healthy, and hitting the postseason without being burned out. Remember, 2 years ago, they shut down Zach Wheeler for like a month in the second half of the season, found their way into the postseason. He looked really good because of it. I don't know that they're going to do that with Ranger Suarez or Zach Wheeler. It sounds like Wheeler's going to make his next start after the AllStar break, so you should see him coming up against the Pittsburgh Pirates. But Ranger, I'm a little bit more concerned now because before it was just, oh, well, he can't find his stuff right now. Now it's, oh, well, he's got a little bit of a back issue. I don't know what extent that back issue is. The Phillies have not put anything out like, oh, he's going on the injured list or anything. I don't know exactly what's going on with that, but that does scare me a little bit because backs can be tricky. I said the same thing when Wheeler had that issue. It turns out that wasn't anything too major, but as someone who threw out my back recently, a back injury survivor I'm an expert on these things. And buddy, if your back hurts, if you're over the age of 30, you know what back pain's like. It ain't good. It can debilitate. Did I say debilitize? Debilitate your whole body. It can make it impossible for you to move around. It can make it very difficult to spot pitches. It can make it painful to go out there. So something to keep an eye on with Ranger Suarez. You already have Spencer Turnbull on the injured list. You have Taijuan Walker on the injured list. If Ranger Suarez has to take an injured list, then all of a sudden, the starting pitching for the Philadelphia Phillies, it looks kind of thin. The guys you have in the top three spots, if Ranger needs time, in Wheeler, Nola, and Suarez, Sanchez, look really, really good. And then you're going to have 2 days where it's like, I don't know who we're even throwing. Is Michael Mercado going to continue to make starts? He was basically pitching in the home run derby when he faced the Oakland Athletics. That's not a lot of confidence that inspires doing that. Do you call someone else up? I don't really know who else you call up or send down anybody. Like, I don't really know how you make this work consistently without Ranger Suarez being available. And I don't think the Phillies are going to make a trade for a starter because none of these are like season-ending things. So your four pitchers in the postseason are going to be Wheeler, Suarez, Nola, Sanchez. Maybe in that order, maybe not in that order. But bottom line is you only need four. So you don't need to make a roster move. You do have to, again, war of attrition, survive this second half of the season. And while you have an 8.5 game lead in the division, and you have a solid lead over the Dodgers for the top spot in the National League, and you still are the best team in baseball, it's not like you can go through a 2-week stretch of abysmal baseball and survive that comfortably. This team is not going to do that. They're too talented not to. They're going to keep winning. The lineup, I should say, is going to get better once JT Realmuto comes back, which puts a little bit of less pressure on the pitching staff. But still, anytime you potentially have an injury issue with a starter that's so important to your team like Ranger Suarez is, that can get people a little bit nervous. And hand up right now, I'm a little bit more nervous than I was when I thought it was just, oh, he can't find his pitches right now. Hearing the potential injury stuff, let's just hope that Ranger's okay. I'll keep you updated on anything we hear on that front. We should find out soon who the Philadelphia Phillies are going to throw in the upcoming series against the Pittsburgh Pirates. But the Phils have the next 2 nights off. They're off Wednesday night. They're off Thursday night. So tomorrow's episode, we're going to have a great opportunity to run through some trade deadline talk and a look at what the Philadelphia Phillies could potentially do. We're going to highlight some players, including Mason Miller, who you saw in the All-Star game and in the series this past weekend at Citizens Bank Park. We're going to look through a couple other relievers, and we're going to look through some outfield options. So those are the main categories. On tomorrow's episode, I'm going to break down all of those for you, give my thoughts on the expense, whether I would pay it, and who is the most likely player at each of those positions to end up in a Philadelphia Phillies uniform ahead of the trade deadline. It's a guessing game because I don't know that the Phillies fully know. But hey, if you've listened to this podcast, you know I can be a pretty good guesser at times. It'll be a fun conversation. But that's all for today's episode. Thank you again so much for checking us out. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'll urge you again, if you have not yet, please make sure you're rating and reviewing wherever you consume your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, or if you want to check us out on YouTube, go to the Locked On Phillies channel, hit that subscribe button. Costs you nothing, gets you notifications when new episodes are posted. It's the number one way to help us out. So if you enjoyed this episode, or if you enjoy all our episodes, subscribe to the YouTube. It helps us out significantly. But that's all for today's episode. Once again, I'll be back with you tomorrow. I know it's an off time for the Phillies, but no off time for Locked On Phillies. So I will talk to you again tomorrow on our next episode of Locked On Phillies.